The heat wave had turned the sidewalk into a skillet. Sophie Chen felt the concrete radiating through the worn soles of her sneakers as she hurried down Michigan Avenue. Her backpack heavy with textbooks she couldn't afford to buy new. Pre-med coursework plus double shifts at the diner equaled a permanent state of exhaustion she'd learned to function through like it was her natural setting. 12 hours of slinging coffee and dodging handsy customers left her with exactly $43 in tips, most of it crumpled singles that smelled like maple syrup. Enough for this week's ramen supply. Not enough for the electricity bill due tomorrow. Definitely not enough for next semester's tuition. But that panic attack was scheduled for later tonight after she finished her anatomy homework. The lunch crowd flowed around her like water around a stone. Business suits, designer handbags, Bluetooth earpieces conducting deals worth more than her annual income. This part of Chicago belonged to them, to people who summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen, whose shoes cost more than her rent. Sophie kept her head down and walked faster. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Invisible by design, by necessity. She almost missed it. Almost kept walking like everyone else. The elderly woman went down hard on the corner of Michigan and Erie. Not a graceful stumble. Not a slow sink to the pavement. One moment she was standing at the crosswalk, elegant in a cream linen dress and pearls. The next, her knees buckled and she crumpled like someone had cut her strings. The sound her head made hitting the concrete stopped Sophie's heart. People swerved around the fallen woman like she was a piece of trash blown onto the sidewalk. A teenager in a North Face jacket literally stepped over her outstretched hand without breaking stride. A woman in a power suit glanced down, then away, walking faster as if unconsciousness might be contagious. Sophie's nursing textbook said you had 15 seconds after traumatic head impact to assess for life-threatening injury. She was moving before her brain finished the thought. "Ma'am?" Sophie dropped to her knees beside the woman, ignoring the gravel biting through her thin work pants. "Can you hear me?" The woman's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. Sophie's fingers found the pulse point at her neck, felt the flutter there, rapid but present. Blood trickled from a cut near her hairline, mixing with the silver strands that had escaped from her elegant chignon. She smelled like expensive perfume and something Sophie couldn't quite place, something old-world and sophisticated. A businessman's shadow fell over them. Sophie looked up, hope flaring. "Please, call 911. She needs..." He was already backing away, palms raised like she'd asked him to donate a kidney. "I'm late for a meeting. She could be dying. So call yourself." He disappeared into the crowd. Sophie's phone was at 37% battery, her last charger having finally given up yesterday. She couldn't afford another one until Friday. But she pulled it out anyway, thumb hovering over the emergency call button. "Don't." The word came out barely above a whisper. Sophie looked down. The elderly woman's eyes had opened, dark brown and sharper than Sophie expected from someone who'd just face-planted onto concrete. "Ma'am, you hit your head. You need medical attention. No hospitals." The woman's hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping Sophie's wrist. "Please, no hospitals. Just help me up." Every chapter of her emergency medicine textbook screamed in protest. "That's not safe. You could have a concussion. Internal bleeding, I know what I have." The woman's voice gained strength. "And I know what I need. Please, dear girl. Just help me off this cursed sidewalk before someone takes a photo and puts it on the internet." Sophie hesitated. This violated every protocol she'd learned. But something in the woman's eyes, not fear exactly, but a fierce determination, tinged with what looked like embarrassment, made her relent. "Okay." But slowly. Sophie slipped her arm around the woman's shoulders, taking most of her weight. On 3, 1, 2, they rose together, the woman leaning heavily against Sophie's side. She was lighter than expected, bird-boned beneath the expensive fabric, but her grip was iron. Sophie guided her toward the building's wall, away from the indifferent current of pedestrians. "There's a bench. Can you make it?" "I've made it through worse." But the woman's face had gone pale, a sheen of sweat on her forehead that had nothing to do with the heat. They reached the bench that fronted a coffee shop, one of those artisanal places where a latte cost $10 and came with a side of judgment. Sophie eased the woman down onto the metal slats, then pulled off her own backpack and dug out the ancient first aid kit she kept for emergencies. The gauze was probably older than her relationship with her ex, but it was better than nothing. "Hold still." Sophie dampened a pad with her water bottle and gently cleaned the blood from the woman's hairline. The cut wasn't deep, thank God. Just enough to bleed dramatically the way head wounds did. You're lucky. No stitches needed, but you really should get checked for concussion. You're very kind. The woman studied Sophie's face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, like she was being catalogued, memorized. What's your name? Sophie? Sophie Chen. Chen? Chinese. My grandfather was from Shanghai, came over in the 50s. Sophie taped the gauze carefully, her fingers gentle despite the adrenaline still jangling through her system. What about you? What's your name? The woman smiled, something sad and knowing in the curve of her lips. Maria. And you've saved my life today, Sophie Chen, whether you realize it or not. I just helped you off the sidewalk. Anyone would've, but they didn't. Maria's hand covered Sophie's, warm despite the pallor of peace, her skin. 37 people walked past me. I counted as I fell. You were the only one who stopped. Sophie didn't know what to say to that. She pulled out her phone again. Let me at least call someone for you. A family member? A friend? Not yet. Maria closed her eyes for a moment, seemed to gather herself. When she opened them again, some of the sharpness had returned. Tell me about yourself, Sophie Chen. You have the hands of someone who's done this before. I'm in nursing school. 2nd year. Loyola. Sophie sat back on her heels, suddenly aware of how she must look in her stained diner uniform, her hair escaping from its messy bun. I work at Lou's Diner on Clark Street. Double shifts mostly. Nursing school and waitressing. That must be exhausting. It's fine. The automatic lie came easily. I'm used to it. Maria's eyes said she saw right through that. Where's your family? Sophie's throat tightened. It's just me now. My parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. No siblings, no aunts or uncles here. Just me. I'm sorry. The words carried weight, genuine sympathy that made Sophie's eyes sting in a way she couldn't afford right now. That's a heavy burden to carry alone. Like you said, you make it through worse. Sophie cleared her throat, changing the subject with all the grace of a sledgehammer. Are you feeling better? Any dizziness, nausea, blurred vision? No, just embarrassed. Maria touched the bandage on her forehead delicately. I have low blood sugar. Forgot to eat breakfast this morning because my grandson was lecturing me about taking better care of myself, and the irony of passing out because of it is not lost on me. You need food then. There's a deli across the street. Would you sit with me? Maria's hand found Sophie's again. Just for a few minutes? I'm still shaky, and I'd rather not fall again in front of these vultures. Sophie checked her phone. She had 2 hours before her evening shift started, barely enough. Time to get home, shower, and make it back downtown. But something about this woman, maybe the loneliness Sophie recognized because she carried the same brand herself, made her nod. I can stay for a bit. Good. Maria's smile was radiant. Then you'll let me buy you lunch. Don't argue. It's the least I can do for the girl who saved my life. I didn't. You did. Maria stood, testing her legs. She was steadier now, the color returning to her face. Come, I know a place nearby. Unless you need to be somewhere? Sophie thought of her empty apartment, her mounting bills, the anatomy test next week she wasn't prepared for. She thought of the $43 in her pocket that might buy her a sandwich if she was lucky, and the gnawing hunger that had become her constant companion. I have time, she heard herself say. They walked slowly, Maria's hand light on Sophie's arm for balance. 2 blocks north, then east onto a quieter street where the buildings were older, more refined. Sophie had passed this way 100 times but never really looked. Now she noticed the architectural details, the careful preservation, the sense that money lived here, old money that didn't need to announce itself. Maria stopped in front of a restaurant called Bella Notte. No sign advertised it, just brass lettering on a dark green awning. Through the windows, Sophie glimpsed white tablecloths, crystal glassware, the kind of place she'd seen in movies but never imagined entering. I can't afford. My treat, I insist. Maria was already pulling open the door, releasing a wave of air conditioning and the scent of fresh bread, garlic, basil. And before you argue further, consider that refusing would be incredibly rude, and I'm a sad old woman who just hit her head. Do you really want that on your conscience? Sophie found herself smiling despite everything. That's manipulative. It's survival. You'll understand when you're my age. Inside, the restaurant fell silent. The hostess, A, Stunning woman in black with perfect makeup, went pale. Signora Moretti, we weren't expecting. I know, Lucia. Just a quiet table for two, please. My young friend and I need lunch. Something happened that Sophie didn't quite understand. Lucia's eyes darted to Sophie, then back to Maria, a question in them that Sophie couldn't read. Maria gave a tiny shake of her head, and whatever tension had filled the space evaporated. Of course. Right this way. They were led past the main dining room to a small private area Sophie hadn't even known existed, separated by a curtain of wooden beads. One table, nestled in an alcove with a view of a tiny garden. Lucia pulled out Maria's chair, then Sophie's, her movements smooth and practiced. Marco will be with you shortly. Can I bring you anything to drink while you wait? Water for both of us. Thank you, Lucia. Sophie waited until they were alone, then leaned forward. You come here a lot? Often enough. Maria unfolded her napkin with the kind of casual grace that spoke of decades of fine dining. My late husband and I, we used to come every Sunday after church. He's been gone 5 years now, but I still come. Memories, you understand. I'm sorry for your loss. Don't be. We had 53 wonderful years together. Not everyone gets that. Maria's eyes softened. He would have liked you, I think. He always appreciated people with kind hearts. A waiter appeared, young and handsome in a crisp white shirt. He addressed Maria in rapid Italian, too fast for Sophie to follow beyond recognizing a few words from her high school language requirement. Maria responded in the same language, her tone warm and familiar. The waiter turned to Sophie. For you, miss? Sophie glanced at the menu he'd placed in front of her and immediately wanted to die. No prices, which meant they were the kind of numbers that made her monthly grocery budget look like pocket change. Maybe just a salad? Nonsense. Maria closed Sophie's menu, decisively. Marco, we'll have the antipasto to start, then the pappardelle with wild mushrooms for her, and the branzino for me. And bring us the good bread, not the day-old they serve the tourists. Marco grinned. You insult me, signora. We never serve day-old bread. That's what you said last time. And I could tell it had been sitting since morning. I will personally throw myself off the roof if today's bread is anything less than perfect. See that you do. But Maria was smiling, and Marco was smiling, and Sophie felt like she'd stepped into a family dynamic she didn't understand. When they were alone again, Sophie cleared her throat. You really don't have to. I want to. Humor an old woman, Sophie. You've already saved my life today. Let me feed you in return. The bread arrived, warm and crusty and served with olive oil that probably cost more per ounce than Sophie's shampoo. She tried to eat slowly, tried not to look like someone who'd survived on instant ramen and hope for the past 3 months. The antipasto that followed was art on a plate, prosciutto and fresh mozzarella and roasted peppers arranged like a painting. Tell me, Maria said, watching Sophie with those sharp, knowing eyes. Why nursing? Why not medical school? You're clearly intelligent enough. Sophie set down her fork. Medical school takes 4 years plus residency. I can't afford another 7 years of school. Not with the debt I'm already carrying. Nursing gets me working faster, making money faster. It's practical. Practical. Maria repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Is that what you wanted, or what you settled for? No one had ever asked Sophie that question. Not her guidance counselor, not her professors, certainly not the loan officers who approved her financial aid without looking her in the eye. She found herself answering honestly. I wanted to be a doctor. Emergency medicine. But my parents died with medical bills they couldn't pay, and I saw what that debt did. To them, the stress, the fighting. I can't do that to myself. So, nursing is what I can afford to want. That's heartbreaking. That's life. Sophie reached for more bread, needing something to do with her hands. Most people don't get what they want. They get what they can survive. And yet you stopped to help a stranger on the sidewalk, even though you were clearly rushing somewhere, even though you were tired and hungry, yes. I can tell. You stopped anyway. Anyone would have, but they didn't. Maria's voice turned fierce. 37 people, Sophie. 37. And you were the one with the least to spare, and you gave anyway. Sophie didn't know what to say to that. She focused on her food instead. The pasta that arrived like a gift from heaven, rich and earthy and so delicious it made her want to cry. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten something that wasn't from a value menu or out of a box. They talked as they ate. Maria asked about Sophie's classes, her favorite subjects, what she did in her limited free time. Sophie found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone since her parents died, talking about her fears, her exhaustion, her determination to finish school no matter what. "You remind me of someone," Maria said as they finished. "My grandson. He had that same fire in him when he was younger, that same refusal to quit even when the world said he should. What does he do now?" Maria's smile turned cryptic. "He runs the family business. Imports, mostly. Very successful, though it cost him his youth. I worry about him. I'm sure he appreciates having you in his life. He tolerates me." But there was love in Maria's voice, deep and uncomplicated. "He's a good boy, even if he's forgotten how to be happy." Marco appeared with the check. Maria waved Sophie off before she could even think about offering to pay, slipping him a credit card that looked like it was made of actual platinum. "Thank you for lunch," Sophie said as they stepped back onto the street. "Really? I can't remember the last time I ate like that. Then you must come back." Maria pulled a business card from her purse. Elegant cream cardstock with embossed lettering. "This is my personal number. Call me. We'll do this again." Sophie looked at the card. Just a name, Maria Moretti, and a phone number. "I don't want to impose." "You couldn't impose if you tried. I'm a lonely old woman who just found someone interesting to talk to. Call me. Sophie Chen. Promise me." Something in Maria's tone made it feel less like a request and more like a lifeline being thrown. Sophie tucked the card carefully into her wallet. "I promise." "Good." Maria surprised her by pulling her into a hug, brief but tight. "Thank you again, for stopping, for caring. The world needs more people like you." Then she was walking away, her pace steadier now, her head held high despite the bandage. Sophie watched her go, this strange, elegant woman who'd bought her lunch and treated her like a person instead of invisible waitress number 7. Sophie's phone buzzed. A text from her manager. "Where are you? You're on in 20 minutes. Didn't you check the schedule?" Ice flooded her stomach. She'd gotten the shifts wrong. She was supposed to be at work right now, not standing on a street corner full of pasta and warmth. She ran. 3 weeks later, Sophie had almost convinced herself it had been a dream. A strange, wonderful dream where someone noticed her and bought her lunch and treated her like she mattered. Real life had reasserted itself with a vengeance. Another test, another shift, another pile of bills she couldn't pay. The card sat in her wallet untouched. She'd pulled it out a dozen times, stared at the number, but never called. What would she even say? "Thanks for lunch 3 weeks ago? Want to hang out with the broke college student who can barely keep her head above water?" It was Thursday, which meant anatomy lab, which meant pretending not to gag, while studying cadavers on 3 hours of sleep. Sophie stumbled into the lab room at Loyola, her backpack weighing approximately 1,000 pounds, her eyes scratchy with exhaustion. Her lab partner, Jessica, was already there, her perfect blonde ponytail and pressed scrubs making Sophie feel even more like a disaster. "You look terrible. Good morning to you too. Seriously, Sophie, when's the last time you slept? Sleep is for people without student loans." Sophie pulled on her lab coat, checking her pockets for gloves. "What are we dissecting today?" "Cardiovascular system. Oh, and Dr. Morrison said he wants to talk to you after class." Sophie's stomach dropped. "About what?" "Didn't say. But he looked serious." The lab passed in a blur of arteries and ventricles, and Sophie's mounting panic about what the professor wanted. When the other students filed out, she approached Dr. Morrison's desk on legs that felt like water. "Miss Chen, thank you for staying." He didn't look up from his paperwork. "I wanted to discuss your performance in this class. I know my last test wasn't great, but I've been working double shifts. And if I could just... Your performance has been exemplary." He looked up now, his stern expression softening slightly. "Your test scores are among the highest in the class. Your lab work is meticulous, and your clinical instincts are excellent." Sophie blinked. "Then what? I'm recommending you for the emergency medicine internship program at Northwestern. It's competitive, only takes 5 students per year, but it provides a stipend and could open doors for you after graduation. With your grades and apparent dedication, I think you'd be an excellent candidate." Sophie's throat closed. "That's incredibly generous, but I can't. I need to work. I have bills, rent. I can't afford to take an unpaid internship. It's paid, $22 an hour, flexible scheduling around your classes, and if you perform well, there's potential for a job offer after graduation." The number hit her like a physical blow. $22 an hour was more than she made at the diner. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one, with better hours and actual relevance to her degree. It was impossible. It was a miracle. "Why me?" she whispered. Dr. Morrison hesitated. "Your application was flagged by the program director. Apparently, you come highly recommended by someone on the hospital board, though the paperwork doesn't specify who." "Do you know anyone at Northwestern?" Sophie's mind went blank. She knew exactly 3 people in Chicago. Her manager at Lou's Diner, her landlord who hated her, and Jessica from lab, who she'd never spoken to outside class. No one on a hospital board. No one with that kind of influence. "I don't understand." "Neither do I, honestly, but the recommendation was emphatic. So unless you're secretly related to the hospital's largest donor, someone thinks you're worth investing in." He slid a folder across the desk. "The paperwork is here. Think about it. Let me know by Monday." Sophie left the lab in a daze, the folder clutched to her chest. $22 an hour. Flexible scheduling. A path to actual employment. It was too good, too convenient, too perfect. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her swipe right. "Hello? Sophie Chen?" A man's voice, deep and professional. "This is Vincent Moretti. I work for the Moretti family. Signora Maria asked me to reach out. She'd like to see you this evening if you're available." Sophie's heart stopped. "Is she okay? Did something happen?" "She's fine. She'd simply like to invite you to dinner. I can send a car to pick you up from your apartment at 6, if that works for you." "How did you get this number? How do you know where I live?" A pause. "Signora Maria is very resourceful, and she speaks very highly of you. Will 6 o'clock work?" Every instinct screamed at her to say no. To hang up, to throw the card away, to forget about the kind old woman who'd bought her lunch. Because this was weird, this was a red flag, this was how people ended up on true crime podcasts. But Sophie thought of Maria's warm eyes, her genuine kindness, the way she'd treated Sophie like a person instead of a problem. And she thought of the internship that had appeared out of nowhere, from someone on the hospital board who knew her name. 6 o'clock, Sophie heard herself say. "But I'm coming on my own. Just text me the address." "Of course." Vincent's tone warmed slightly. "Thank you, Miss Chen. The Signora will be very pleased." He hung up. 10 seconds later, an address appeared on her phone screen, followed by, "Dress casually. Maria wants you to be comfortable." Sophie stared at her phone, then at the folder from Dr. Morrison, then at the card in her wallet she'd carried for 3 weeks without calling. She had no idea what she was walking into, but she'd stopped on a sidewalk 3 weeks ago when no one else would, and that decision had set something in motion she didn't understand. At 5:45, she'd find out what. Sophie stood outside the address Vincent had sent, her phone clutched in one hand, her other hand gripping her jacket even though the evening was warm. The building looked like something from a movie. A brownstone in Lincoln Park with ivy climbing the brick walls and actual gas lamps flanking the entrance. Old money architecture, the kind that whispered about generations of wealth. This was a mistake. She should turn around, go home, forget about the kind old woman and the strange invitation. But Sophie's feet carried her up the stone steps anyway, and her finger pressed the doorbell before her brain could override it. The door opened immediately. A man stood there, 50-something, built like a boxer who'd traded the ring for a gym membership, wearing a suit that fit like it had been sewn onto him. His eyes were the kind that cataloged threats automatically, and Sophie watched herself, being assessed and categorized in 2 seconds flat. "Miss Chen." Not a question. "Please, come in. I'm Vincent." We spoke on the phone. The interior of the brownstone stole what little breath Sophie had left. Marble floors, a chandelier that belonged in a museum, artwork on the walls that looked original and expensive. Everything whispered wealth so old it didn't need to shout. "This is Maria's house?" Sophie's voice came out smaller than she intended. "One of them. The Signora will be down shortly. Would you like something to drink while you wait?" "I'm fine, thanks." Vincent gestured to a sitting room off the main hallway. Sophie perched on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than her semester's tuition, her hands folded in her lap, her heart hammering. Footsteps on the stairs. Maria appeared, dressed in an elegant silk blouse and tailored pants, her silver hair swept up in a chignon that probably required a professional. The bandage was gone, replaced by a small butterfly bandage barely visible at her hairline. "Sophie!" Maria's face lit up. "I'm so glad you came. I was afraid you'd think me a crazy old woman for calling out of the blue." Sophie stood, suddenly conscious of her jeans and university hoodie. "Your house is beautiful. It's too big for one person, but I'm sentimental." Maria took Sophie's hands, her grip warm and firm. "Come. I've had dinner prepared. Nothing fancy. Just pasta and good conversation. I feel underdressed. You're perfect." Maria linked her arm through Sophie's, guiding her toward the back of the house. "I told you to dress comfortably. If you'd shown up in a cocktail dress, I would have sent you home to change." They entered a dining room that managed to be both elegant and cozy. A table set for two with simple white dishes and fresh flowers. Through the French doors, Sophie glimpsed a garden lit by string lights, magical and warm. "Please, sit. Wine? Or are you still too young?" Maria's eyes twinkled. "I always forget. American drinking laws. So puritanical. I'm 22. But I probably shouldn't. I have studying to do later. Responsibility." "Good." Maria poured herself a glass of red wine that probably cost more than Sophie's textbooks. "Though you should let yourself enjoy life occasionally. It goes faster than you think." A woman appeared from what Sophie assumed was the kitchen, carrying plates of food that made her mouth water. Caprese salad, fresh bread, pasta that smelled like heaven. She set them down with practiced efficiency and disappeared without a word. "I wanted to thank you," Maria said, as they began to eat. "Properly thank you for what you did 3 weeks ago. That was a dark day for me, and you made it bearable. Anyone would have—" "Stop saying that." Maria's voice turned sharp. "Anyone didn't. You did. Own that, Sophie. Take credit for being better than the 37 people who walked past." Sophie's throat tightened. She focused on her food instead of the sudden sting in her eyes. "I made a few calls," Maria continued casually. "About you. I hope you don't mind." Sophie's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "What kind of calls?" "To Northwestern. I know someone on the hospital board. Good man. Owed me a favor. I asked him to look at your application for the internship program." The food in Sophie's mouth turned to ash. "That was you. You earned it on your own merit. I simply made sure the right people noticed. Your grades are excellent. Your professors speak very highly of you, and you have more work ethic than most people twice your age." Maria sipped her wine. "All I did was open a door. You'll have to walk through it yourself." "I can't accept that. It's too much." "Why? Because you helped me? Because you showed basic human decency when no one else would?" Maria leaned forward. "Listen to me, Sophie Chen. The world is full of people who would walk past a dying woman because helping would make them late for lunch. You're not one of them. That matters. That's worth rewarding. I don't know you. I don't understand why you're doing this. Because I can. Because I have resources, and you have potential, and wasting potential is a sin." Maria's expression softened. "And because I lost my daughter 10 years ago. Cancer. She was a doctor, emergency medicine, just like you want to be. She would have liked you, I think. Would have recognized that fire in you." Sophie's chest ached. "I'm sorry. Don't be. Live for her. Take the opportunities you're given and use them to help people the way you helped me. That's all I ask." They finished dinner in a more comfortable silence, the weight of the revelation settling between them. Sophie kept expecting the other shoe to drop, the catch to reveal itself, but Maria just talked about her life, her late husband, her grandson, who worked too hard and forgot to call. "You should meet him," Maria said, as dessert appeared, some kind of chocolate torte that made Sophie want to weep. "My Nico. He's brilliant but lonely. Works himself to death running the family business." "What kind of business?" "Import-export. Very boring, very successful. His grandfather built it from nothing, and Nico's expanded it across 3 countries, but it's consumed him. He needs someone to remind him there's more to life than profit margins." Sophie smiled. "I don't think I'm qualified to give life advice to a successful businessman. You'd be surprised. Sometimes the best advice comes from people outside our normal circles." Maria finished her wine. "But that's a conversation for another day. For now, I just wanted to see you again, to make sure you were real and not some hallucination from hitting my head." "I'm real." Sophie touched her own arm, half checking. "Still not entirely sure this isn't a dream, but I'm real." "Good. Maria stood, signaling the end of the evening. Vincent will drive you home. And Sophie? The internship starts in 2 weeks. Don't be late. I haven't even accepted it. Yet. You will. You're too smart not to. Maria pulled her into another hug. This one longer, tighter. Thank you again. For stopping. For caring. For reminding me that good people still exist. Sophie left the brownstone in a daze, Vincent holding the car door open for her like she was someone important. The drive home passed in silence, Sophie staring out the window at the city lights, her mind spinning. She'd helped a woman on the sidewalk, one moment of kindness, and somehow it had transformed into dinner in a mansion and an internship at Northwestern, and a strange new connection to someone who moved in circles. Sophie had only ever glimpsed from the outside. It should have felt wrong. It should have felt dangerous. But all Sophie felt was the warm weight of possibility, fragile and terrifying and real. Her phone buzzed as Vincent pulled up to her apartment building. A text from an unknown number. This is Maria. In case you need anything, call anytime. Day or night. Your family now. Sophie stared at those last 3 words until her vision blurred. Your family now. She didn't have family. Hadn't had family since her parents died. But sitting in the back of a car that probably cost more than her life savings, holding a phone with a billionaire's personal number, Sophie felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. She felt like maybe, possibly, she wasn't completely alone anymore. She had no idea what she'd walked into. No idea that the kind grandmother she'd helped was connected to something darker than she could imagine. No idea that family in Maria Moretti's world meant something very different than Sophie understood. But for now, tonight, Sophie just felt grateful. And that was enough. The internship changed everything. Not immediately, not dramatically, but in the slow accumulation of small victories that added up to something resembling a life instead of just survival. Sophie's first paycheck from Northwestern let her pay rent on time for the first time in 8 months. The second let her buy groceries that weren't ramen or day-old bread from the discount rack. By the third, she'd replaced her dying phone and could finally breathe without the constant weight of panic pressing on her chest. Maria called twice a week, always in the evening when she knew Sophie would be home from the hospital. Their conversations were easy, comfortable, ranging from Sophie's cases to Maria's garden to the grandson who still worked too much and called too little. Sophie found herself looking forward to those calls. The warmth of having someone who cared if she'd eaten lunch or remembered to sleep. She'd been working at Northwestern for 6 weeks when everything shattered. It started with a man in the emergency department waiting room. Sophie noticed him because he wasn't doing what people in waiting rooms normally did. He wasn't looking at his phone, wasn't reading magazines, wasn't pacing or complaining about the wait. He was watching her, had been watching her for the past 20 minutes as she moved between triage and the nurse's station. Mid-30s, average height, wearing jeans and a jacket despite the late September heat. Nothing remarkable about him except for the way his eyes tracked her movements with the focus of someone conducting surveillance. Sophie's skin prickled. She ducked into the supply closet, pulled out her phone, and texted Maria. Weird question, but is it normal for someone to stare at you in public? Maria's response came immediately. Where are you? Northwestern ER. There's a guy in the waiting room who's been watching me for like half an hour. Probably nothing, but it's creeping me out. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, don't leave the hospital. Stay in public areas. I'm sending Vincent. Sophie's stomach dropped. That's not necessary. I'm probably just being paranoid. Her phone rang. Maria's voice was tight, controlled in a way Sophie had never heard before. Describe him to me. Everything. Maria, I'm sure it's nothing. Sophie, describe him. Something in her tone made Sophie's mouth go dry. She described the man, his clothes, his position in the waiting room, the way he'd shifted when she'd looked directly at him. Maria's silence on the other end felt heavy. Wrong. I'm 20 minutes away, Maria said finally. Vincent is closer. He'll be there in 10. Do not leave the building until he arrives. Do you understand? You're scaring me. Good. Fear keeps you alert. Promise me you'll wait. I promise. Maria hung up. Sophie stood in the supply closet, her heart hammering, wondering what the hell she'd just triggered. She cracked the door open, peered toward the waiting room. The man was gone. Her chest loosened slightly. See? Just paranoid. Probably a family member of a patient. Maybe even someone who recognized her from somewhere and was too shy to say hello. She was manufacturing danger where none existed, because Maria's reaction had spooked her. Sophie stepped out of the supply closet and nearly collided with her supervisor, Karen. There you are. We need you in trauma too. MVA coming in, multiple victims, all hands on deck. The next 40 minutes were controlled chaos. A 3-car pileup on the Kennedy Expressway had sent 6 people to Northwestern, ranging from minor injuries to critical. Sophie moved through the trauma bay on autopilot, her training overriding everything else, placing IV lines and monitoring vitals and helping the doctors stabilize a man whose steering wheel had crushed his chest. She forgot about the man in the waiting room, forgot about Maria's strange warning, forgot about everything except the immediate crisis in front of her. By the time the last patient was stabilized and transferred to surgery, Sophie's scrubs were spotted with blood, and her hands were shaking from adrenaline crash. She stripped off her gloves, washed up in the sink, and checked her phone. 7 missed calls from Maria, 3 from Vincent, a dozen texts, each more urgent than the last. Her stomach flipped. She dialed Maria back with trembling fingers. "Where are you?" Maria's voice was razor sharp. I'm sorry. We had a mass casualty event. I couldn't look at my phone. I'm fine. I'm at the hospital. Stay exactly where you are. Vincent is in the parking garage. He's coming to get you now. Maria, what's going on? You're really freaking me out. I'll explain everything when you're safe. Just please trust me. Do not leave the hospital alone. The line went dead. Sophie stood in the trauma bay, surrounded by the organized chaos of an emergency department, feeling the first real tendrils of fear wrap around her chest. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't Maria overreacting. Something was genuinely wrong. Her supervisor appeared again. Chen, you can head out. You've been here for 10 hours, and you look dead on your feet. I'm waiting for a ride. In the break room, maybe. You're kind of in the way. Sophie grabbed her bag and headed for the staff break room, a windowless space with uncomfortable chairs and a coffee maker that produced something vaguely resembling motor oil. She sank into a chair, her legs suddenly too weak to support her weight. The door opened. Not Vincent, not anyone she recognized. The man from the waiting room stepped inside, and this close Sophie could see details she'd missed before. The tattoo peeking out from under his collar, some kind of symbol she didn't recognize. The bulge under his jacket that could have been a phone but probably wasn't. The cold calculation in his eyes that had nothing to do with waiting for medical care. Sophie Chen. Not a question. We need to talk. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to scream, to do anything except stay in this windowless room with a stranger who knew her name. But her body had frozen, her training abandoning her completely in the face of real danger. I don't know you. Her voice came out, steadier than she felt. But I know you. Know that you've been spending a lot of time with Maria Moretti, having dinner at her house, taking phone calls from her, accepting her little gifts. He stepped closer, and Sophie caught the smell of cigarettes and something metallic. That makes you interesting to certain people. I don't understand what you want. Information about Maria's schedule, her routines, who visits the house, security arrangements, simple stuff. And in return, you get to keep your cozy little internship and your nice new life without any complications. Sophie's brain finally kicked into gear. This wasn't random. This was targeted, planned, dangerous in ways she'd only ever seen on television. I'm not going to spy on Maria. You sure about that? The man pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, turned it toward her. Because I'm guessing you'd hate for something to happen to that pretty apartment you just moved into. Or maybe your friend Jessica from school. She lives alone, right? That neighborhood isn't very safe after dark. Ice flooded Sophie's veins. You're threatening me. I'm offering you a choice. Information in exchange for safety. Seems fair to me. The break room door slammed open. Vincent filled the doorway, and Sophie had never been so grateful to see anyone in her entire life. Behind him, 2 more men in dark suits, their presence transforming the cramped space into something that felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. The man with the tattoo didn't run. He just smiled, cold and confident. We're having a private conversation. No, Vincent said quietly. You're leaving. Now. This doesn't concern you. Everything concerning Miss Chen concerns me. Vincent moved forward, and despite being unarmed, despite being outnumbered by the threat this man represented, he radiated danger in a way that made Sophie's kidneys clench with fear. You have 5 seconds to walk out of this hospital. After that, I stopped being polite. The man looked at Sophie, then at Vincent, doing some kind of mental calculation. Whatever he decided, it made him tuck his phone away and head toward the door. Think about what I said, Sophie. You've got my number now. Use it before things get complicated. He disappeared into the hallway. Vincent gestured to his companions, and they followed, silent and purposeful. Vincent turned to Sophie, his expression softening slightly. Are you hurt? Sophie shook her head, not trusting her voice. Good, let's get you out of here. He offered his hand, and Sophie took it, grateful when he helped her to her feet because her legs felt like water. Car's waiting. The Signora is at her house. She wants to see you. They moved through the hospital quickly, Vincent's presence making people step aside without conscious thought. In the parking garage, a black SUV idled near the elevator, its engine running, a driver behind the wheel. Vincent opened the back door, and Sophie climbed in, her hands still shaking. Maria sat in the back seat, her face pale but composed. The moment Sophie was inside, Maria pulled her into a fierce hug. Thank God you're safe. What's happening? Who was that man? Why did he threaten Jessica? The questions tumbled out, panic making Sophie's voice rise. Maria, what the hell is going on? Maria released her, took Sophie's face in her hands, forced her to make eye contact. I'm going to explain everything. But first, we need to get you somewhere secure. Can you trust me for just a little longer? Sophie wanted to say no, wanted to demand answers right here, right now, in this parking garage where at least the surroundings were familiar. But Maria's eyes held genuine fear, genuine concern, and Sophie had learned to trust her instincts about people. Okay, she whispered. Okay. The drive should have taken 15 minutes. It took 45. Vincent making random turns and doubling back twice, checking mirrors constantly. By the time they pulled up to Maria's brownstone, Sophie's stomach was in knots, and her mind was racing through worst-case scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. Inside, the elegant house Sophie had visited for dinner felt different. Threatening, like the beautiful facade had been stripped away to reveal something darker underneath. Maria led her to the sitting room, poured her a glass of water that Sophie's hands shook too badly to hold properly. I need to tell you the truth, Maria said, settling onto the sofa beside her. And I need you to listen without interrupting, because if I don't say it all at once, I might lose my courage. Sophie set down the water, nodded. Maria took a deep breath. My husband, Salvatore, he wasn't just a businessman. He was the head of one of Chicago's oldest crime families. Import-export was real, but it was also a front for other operations. Money laundering, protection, gambling, some drug trafficking, though Sal always tried to keep that minimal. He built an empire, and when he died, our grandson Nico inherited it. The words hit Sophie like physical blows. Crime family, money laundering, drugs. The room tilted sideways, and she gripped the sofa arm to keep from falling. I know what you're thinking, Maria continued, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. That I lied to you, that I used you, that everything between us was manipulation. But Sophie, you have to believe me when I say that helping you, getting to know you, caring about you, none of that was fake. You saved my life, and I genuinely wanted to repay that kindness. You're in the Mafia. Sophie's voice sounded hollow, distant. You're actually in the Mafia, and you brought me into this world without telling me. Yes, and I'm sorrier than you can possibly imagine. Why? Why bring me into this at all? I helped you stand up. That's it. You could have just walked away. Because I'm a lonely old woman who saw something good in you. And I was selfish enough to want that goodness in my life. Maria's composure cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. Because my daughter died, and you reminded me of her, and I convinced myself I could keep you separate from the ugliness of Nico's business. I thought I could protect you from this. Well, you didn't. Sophie stood up, her whole body shaking. That man threatened Jessica. He knows where I live. He wants me to spy on you. How is any of that protection? The Valentino family has been trying to move into Moretti territory for months. They've been watching me, looking for weaknesses. When you started coming around, they noticed. They think you're an easy target, someone they can use to get information about our operations. Maria stood too, reaching for Sophie's hands, but Sophie pulled away. I never meant for this to happen. I swear to you, if I'd known they were watching that closely, you would have what? Not invited me to dinner? Not gotten me the internship? Just let me stay invisible and safe? Sophie's voice broke. I was fine, Maria. Poor and exhausted and barely surviving. But I was fine. And now I'm what? A target? A liability? What happens to me now? Now I protect you. Maria's voice turned hard, the soft grandmother disappearing behind something sharp and dangerous. The Valentinos think you're a weak point. They're wrong. You're under Moretti protection now, whether you want it or not. They threaten you. They threaten my family. I don't want to be protected. I want to go back to my life. There is no going back. Maria's tone was gentle but final. I'm sorry, sweetheart. But the moment you helped me on that sidewalk, the moment the Valentinos saw you at my house, your old life ended. You're visible now. And in our world, visible means vulnerable. Sophie sank back onto the sofa, her hands covering her face. She wanted to cry, to scream, to storm out of this house and never come back. But underneath the terror and the betrayal, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that Maria was right. The man in the hospital had found her, had known her name, her address, her friend's schedule. Whatever Sophie had stumbled into, walking away wouldn't make it disappear. What happens now? She asked finally, her voice muffled by her hands. Now you meet my grandson, and he decides how to handle this. Sophie looked up, dread coiling in her stomach. The one who runs the family business. The one you said works too hard. Nico. Yes. Maria's expression held something Sophie couldn't quite read. Apology, maybe. Or resignation. He's going to be angry. At me, mostly, for bringing you into this. But he'll protect you. That's what he does. It's all he knows how to do. A door opened somewhere in the house. Footsteps, quick and purposeful, moving toward them. Sophie's heart kicked into overdrive, her body flooding with adrenaline for the second time that night. The man who entered the sitting room made the breath catch in Sophie's throat. Nico Moretti was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, with dark hair and eyes like black ice. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her entire education, and he moved with the kind of controlled grace that spoke of violence held carefully in check. When his gaze landed on Sophie, she felt pinned like a butterfly under glass, examined and catalogued and judged in the space of a heartbeat. Then he looked at his grandmother, and his expression shifted to something Sophie could only describe as furious disappointment. Nonna. His voice was quiet, which somehow made it worse. What have you done? Maria lifted her chin, meeting his gaze without flinching. I saved a life, and made a friend. Is that such a terrible thing? When the Valentinos are using that friend as leverage? Yes. Nico turned back to Sophie, and she fought the urge to shrink into the sofa cushions. Miss Chen, I apologize for the situation my grandmother has put you in. If I'd known she was bringing civilians into her life without security protocols. Don't blame her, Sophie found herself saying, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm an adult. I made my own choices. Did you? Nico's eyebrow raised. Did you choose to have Marco Valentino approach you at your workplace? Did you choose to have your friend's life threatened? Of course not. But I chose to help Maria when she fell. I chose to have dinner with her. I chose to accept the internship. Sophie stood up, refusing to let this dangerous stranger make her feel small. So yeah, maybe I made choices without knowing all the facts. But they were still my choices. Something flickered in Nico's eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. Vincent says Valentino gave you a phone number. Do you still have it? Sophie pulled out her phone, found the unknown number that had appeared during the encounter, handed the phone to Nico. He examined it, his jaw tightening, then passed it to Vincent, who'd appeared silently in the doorway. Burner phone, probably already disconnected. Nico looked at Sophie again, and this time his expression had softened fractionally. The Valentinos won't stop. Now that they've made contact, they'll escalate. Surveillance, more threats, possibly direct action, if they think it'll pressure my grandmother into making concessions. So what do I do? Hire security? Move? Change my name and flee the state? Sophie heard the edge of hysteria in her voice, fought to control it. You let me protect you. Nico's tone was matter of fact, like he was discussing a business transaction instead of her entire life. You move into a secure location, you accept a security detail, you follow protocols until we've resolved the Valentino situation. For how long? However long it takes. Sophie laughed, a broken sound. I have classes. I have a job. I have a life, Mr. Moretti. I can't just disappear into some safe house indefinitely. You can continue your internship under supervision, We'll arrange transportation, security at the hospital, whatever you need to maintain your routine. Nico moved closer, and Sophie caught the scent of expensive cologne and something else, something that smelled like danger barely contained. But you will not be alone, and you will not be unprotected. That's not negotiable. And if I refuse? If I just want to walk away from all of this? Then the Valentinos will use you to hurt my family, and I'll have to clean up the aftermath. Nico's voice dropped to something almost gentle. I don't want that. Neither does my grandmother. And I'm guessing you don't want to be responsible for whatever violence might result from your refusal. It was manipulation, cold and calculated, but it was also truth. Sophie had seen the man in the hospital, had heard the threat in his voice. Walking away wouldn't make her safe. It would just make her an easier target. I hate this, she whispered. I know. Maria was beside her suddenly, taking her hand. I know, and I'm sorry, but Nico is right. This is the only way to keep you safe. Sophie looked between them, the elegant grandmother and the dangerous grandson, two sides of a world she'd never wanted any part of. But refusing wouldn't change reality. It would just make her vulnerable. Fine, she said finally. But I have conditions. Nico's eyebrow raised again. You're not exactly in a position to negotiate. I am if you want my cooperation instead of my resentment. Sophie squared her shoulders, channeling every ounce of courage she had left. Jessica doesn't get hurt. Whatever you have to do to keep the Valentinos away from her, you do it. And my internship continues without interruption. I've worked too hard to get there to lose it because of mob politics. Done. And I want regular updates. No more lies. No more secrets. If something's happening that affects my safety, I get told about it. Immediately. Nico studied her for a long moment, something almost like approval in his dark eyes. Agreed. Anything else? Yeah, Sophie's voice hardened. When this is over, when the Valentino thing is resolved, I get to decide if I want to keep this connection to your family. No pressure, no manipulation, no guilt trips. My choice. Fair. Nico extended his hand. Do we have an agreement, Miss Chen? Sophie looked at his hand. This symbol of entering a world she'd never imagined existed. Then she thought of the man in the hospital, the threat to Jessica, the way her peaceful life had been shattered in the space of an hour. She thought of Maria's kindness, genuine even if the context had been incomplete. And she thought of the choice that had started everything, stopping on a sidewalk when no one else would. She shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and somehow made her feel both terrified and strangely safe at the same time. We have an agreement. The safe house wasn't what Sophie expected. She'd imagined something industrial, a warehouse or anonymous apartment building with concrete walls and minimal furniture. Instead, Nico drove her to a renovated Greystone in Wicker Park, 3 stories of vintage architecture with modern security systems carefully hidden behind historic charm. It's one of our properties, Nico explained as they pulled into the private garage. Officially owned by a shell corporation. No connection to the Moretti name. Security system is state-of-the-art. Panic buttons in every room, cameras covering all approaches. You'll be safe here. Sophie climbed out of the car, her overnight bag clutched in her hand. Vincent had driven to her apartment to pack her essentials while she was at Maria's, and Sophie tried not to think about strangers going through her underwear drawer. How long will I be here? Until we've dealt with the Valentinos. A week, maybe 2. Nico led her through a door that required both a key code and fingerprint scan. Could be longer if they escalate. Inside, the safe house looked like an upscale short-term rental. Hardwood floors, leather furniture, a kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. Nothing personal, nothing warm, but comfortable in a clinical way. Bedrooms are upstairs. Take whichever you want. Nico set her bag down, then pulled out a phone, sleek and new. This is for you. Encrypted, secure line. My number is already programmed in, along with Vincent's and my grandmother's. Use this for all communications. Your personal phone stays off unless absolutely necessary. Sophie took the phone like it might bite her. What about my friends? My school? People are going to wonder where I am. Tell them you're house-sitting for a family friend. If anyone asks for specifics, be vague. The less information out there, the safer you are. Nico moved to the window, checking the sightlines with practiced efficiency. Vincent will take you to Northwestern tomorrow morning. Stay with you during your shift, bring you back here. Same routine every day until further notice. I'm going to feel like I'm in prison. You're going to be alive. Nico turned back to her, his expression unreadable. I know this isn't what you signed up for, but the Valentinos don't take prisoners. They send messages through body counts. So if having a security detail feels restrictive, remember that the alternative is much worse. Sophie sank onto the leather sofa, exhaustion finally catching up with her. How did your grandmother survive in this world? She seemed so normal, so kind. How do you reconcile that with, she gestured vaguely, all of this? She survived by being smarter than everyone underestimated her for being. My grandfather built the business, but Nana was the one who kept it running after he died. She knows exactly what she's part of. Nico's voice softened slightly. But she never lost her humanity. Never let the darkness turn her cruel. That's rare in our world. Is that why you're angry with her? For bringing me in? I'm angry because she put herself at risk. Nico moved to the kitchen, pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He poured without asking, handed one to Sophie. If the Valentinos had taken you, used you as leverage, she would have done anything to get you back, including putting herself in danger. That's unacceptable. Sophie sipped the whiskey, felt it burn down her throat. She loves you. She talks about you all the time, how hard you work, how lonely you are, how she wishes you'd find someone to make you happy. My grandmother has an overactive imagination and a tendency to meddle. But there was affection in Nico's voice, buried under the irritation. She showed me pictures of your parents, your grandfather, your sister. Sophie watched his face carefully. She said your sister died young, an overdose. Nico's expression went carefully blank. My grandmother talks too much. She said that's why you keep the drug trafficking minimal in your organization, because you couldn't save your sister, but you can keep other people's sisters from dying the same way. That's a generous interpretation. Nico finished his whiskey in one swallow. The reality is that drugs attract federal attention we don't need. It's a business decision, nothing more. I don't believe that. You don't know me well enough to have an opinion. Maybe not, but I know your grandmother, and she loves you enough that if you were purely the cold criminal you're pretending to be, she'd be disappointed. She's not disappointed. She's proud. Sophie set down her glass. So either she's delusional, or there's more to you than the scary mob boss routine. Nico stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across his face. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. It transformed him, made him look younger and somehow more dangerous at the same time. My grandmother warned me you were smart. She didn't mention you were also reckless. I stopped on a sidewalk to help a stranger who'd fallen. I think we've established that reckless is kind of my thing. That recklessness is going to get you killed. Or it's going to keep me interesting enough that you don't get bored protecting me. Nico laughed. A real laugh that sounded rusty from disuse. You're definitely interesting. I'll give you that. He stood, collecting their glasses. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day, and you'll need your energy to deal with Vincent. He takes his job very seriously. Nico? Sophie stood too, suddenly not wanting him to leave, even though he terrified her. Thank you for protecting me, even though I'm just some random girl your grandmother adopted on a whim. You're not random. You saved Nana's life. His voice dropped, became something raw and honest. That means you're family now. And I protect family, no matter what. He left before Sophie could respond, his footsteps echoing on the stairs. A door closing somewhere above. Sophie stood alone in the pristine safe house, holding an encrypted phone and wearing yesterday's clothes, and tried to process how completely her life had been upended in the space of 8 hours. She'd helped an old woman stand up. That was all. One moment of kindness on a crowded sidewalk, and now she was living in a safe house, protected by a mob boss, targeted by his enemies, and somehow, impossibly, part of a family she'd never asked to join. Sophie climbed the stairs, chose the bedroom farthest from the sounds of Nico moving around, and collapsed onto a bed that smelled like expensive laundry detergent and nothing. She pulled out the encrypted phone, stared at the short contact list, and felt the weight of her new reality settle over her like a blanket made of lead. Tomorrow she'd go back to Northwestern, pretend everything was normal, and hope that the Valentinos didn't decide she was worth taking instead of just watching. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to be both nursing student and Mafia protection detail. Tomorrow she'd deal with all of it. Tonight, she just needed to sleep. And maybe, if she was lucky, forget for a few hours that her life had become a crime thriller she never wanted to star in. Sophie's phone buzzed at 6 a.m. Not her personal phone, which sat dead and useless on the nightstand, but the encrypted one Nico had given her. She grabbed it groggily, squinting at the screen. Vincent. Car leaves in 45 minutes. Breakfast downstairs. She dragged herself out of bed, showered in a bathroom stocked with expensive toiletries that made her feel like she was in a hotel, and dressed in the scrubs Vincent had somehow acquired in her exact size. When she made it downstairs, she found Vincent at the kitchen table reading the Tribune, a spread of food laid out that looked catered from somewhere expensive. "Morning," Sophie mumbled, making a beeline for the coffee. "Miss Chen." Vincent folded his paper. "How did you sleep?" Like someone whose entire life got turned upside down. She poured coffee, added cream and sugar, and took a grateful sip. "Where's Nico?" "Already at the office. He keeps early hours." Vincent gestured to the food. "Eat. You'll need your energy." Sophie loaded a plate with scrambled eggs and toast, surprised to find herself hungry despite everything. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. How long have you worked for the Morettis?" 23 years. I started as Mr. Salvatore's driver, moved up to head of security after he died." Vincent's expression was fond. "They're good people, the Morettis. Better than most in this business. But they're still criminals." "Yes. But there are degrees of wrong, Miss Chen. The Morettis don't traffic children, don't push fentanyl, don't make examples out of innocents. They have lines they won't cross. Some families don't." He sipped his own coffee. "When you judge them, remember that. The man yesterday, Marco Valentino. What happens to him? That's not something you need to worry about. Vincent, no more secrets, remember?" Nico agreed. Vincent studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Marco Valentino will be dealt with. Probably not killed, not for approaching you. But he'll understand that you're off limits. The message will be clear." Sophie's stomach turned, but she forced herself to keep eating. This was her world now, at least temporarily. She needed to understand how it worked, even the ugly parts. The drive to Northwestern took 25 minutes, Vincent navigating morning traffic with the same calm competence he approached everything else. He parked in the staff garage, in a spot Sophie had never used because it required special clearance. Apparently, special clearance was easy to acquire when you had mob connections. "I'll be in the waiting area," Vincent said as they walked toward the emergency department entrance. "You need anything, you text me immediately. Don't wait, don't hesitate. Immediately." "Got it. And Miss Chen? Try to act normal. The more you look over your shoulder, the more people will notice something's wrong." Sophie nodded, took a deep breath, and pushed through the doors into the familiar chaos of the ER. Karen spotted her immediately, relief crossing her face. "Chen! Thank God!" "We're slammed. Trauma 3 needs an IV line, and we've got 2 more ambulances en route." Sophie fell into her routine gratefully, letting the familiar rhythm of emergency medicine push everything else aside. IV lines, patient assessments, medication administration, the controlled dance of saving lives. For 4 hours, she was just Sophie the nursing student, not Sophie the mob boss's protected civilian. Then, during her break, Jessica appeared in the staff lounge. "Hey, I've been trying to call you. Your phone goes straight to voicemail." Jessica flopped into the chair beside her. "Everything okay? You look exhausted." Sophie's mind raced. The cover story Nico had provided felt flimsy in the face of her friend's genuine concern. "I'm house-sitting for a family friend. Their place is in a dead zone for cell. Reception. Sorry, I didn't tell you earlier." "Oh, well, as long as you're okay." Jessica pulled out her lunch. "There was something weird yesterday, though. This guy came to our building asking about you. Said he was your cousin, but he seemed sketchy. The super didn't let him in, but it creeped me out." Ice flooded Sophie's chest. "What did he look like?" "I don't know, average? Dark hoodie? Maybe 30s? The super said he was asking weird questions, like what your schedule was, and if you lived alone." Jessica frowned. "Sophie, you're white as a sheet. Do you know this guy?" "No. But if he comes back, don't talk to him. And call the police immediately." Sophie pulled out the encrypted phone, texted Vincent. "Valentinos approached Jessica at my building yesterday. Need protection for her as soon as possible." "Sophie, you're freaking me out. What's going on?" "I can't explain right now. But please, promise me you'll be careful. Don't walk alone at night, don't let strangers into the building, and call me if anything feels wrong." "You're acting really weird." "I know. I'm sorry. Just please trust me on this." Sophie's phone buzzed. Vincent. On it. Protection detail assigned within the hour. Jessica left, looking confused and worried, and Sophie spent the rest of her shift distracted, half expecting Marco Valentino to appear at any moment. But her shift ended without incident, and Vincent was waiting exactly where he'd promised. His presence somehow both reassuring and terrifying. "Your friend will have protection," Vincent said as they drove back to the safe house. Subtle, but effective. "The Valentinos won't touch her." "How can you be sure?" "Because Nico made it very clear what would happen if they did. And unlike some families, we keep our promises." The safe house felt less foreign today, almost comfortable after the stress of maintaining normalcy at the hospital. Sophie changed out of her scrubs, made herself tea, and was settling onto the couch when Nico appeared, materializing from wherever he'd been all day. "How was work?" "Fine. Exhausting. Normal." Sophie set down her tea. "The Valentinos approached Jessica yesterday. At our building." "I know. It's handled." Nico sat across from her, loosening his tie. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there last night. "She has protection now. 2 of my people, rotating shifts. They'll keep their distance, but they'll intervene if necessary." "Does she know?" "No. And she won't, unless something happens. The less she knows, the safer she is." Nico pulled out his phone, showed Sophie a photo. "This is Marco Valentino. I want you to confirm he's the man from the hospital." Sophie studied the image, felt her stomach clench. "That's him. Good. We're meeting with the Valentinos tomorrow night. Neutral ground, mediated by one of the old families. This ends before it escalates further." "What does that mean? How does it end?" "Depends on what they want. If it's just about territory, we can negotiate. If it's about challenging our position, sends a message." Nico's expression went dark. "Then we send a different kind of message." Sophie swallowed hard. "Will there be violence?" "Probably not at the meeting itself. That would be breaking code." He looked at her, something almost gentle in his eyes. "I know this is hard for you. I know you didn't ask for any of it, but you're handling it better than most people would." "I don't feel like I'm handling it. I feel like I'm barely treading water. That's what handling it looks like." Nico stood, moved to the window with the same cautious precision he always displayed. "My grandmother called. She wants to see you. Says she misses you already, and needs to make sure I'm not being too harsh." "Are you being too harsh?" "Probably." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "But if I wasn't, you wouldn't survive what's coming. Fear keeps you careful. Careful keeps you alive. That's a grim way to live. It's the only way I know." He turned back to her, and Sophie was struck by how lonely he looked despite being surrounded by power and family and resources. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow could be a long day." But he didn't leave. Instead, he sat down again. This time on the same couch, close enough that Sophie could smell his cologne and see the fine lines around his eyes. "Can I ask you something?" Sophie said quietly. "Depends on the question. Why do you do this? Run the family business, live this dangerous life?" Nico frowned. "You could walk away, couldn't you? You're smart enough to be anything else. Walking away isn't an option when you're born into this world. The moment my grandfather started building his empire, my fate was sealed. My father's fate, my sister's fate. We were Morettis before we were anything else." His voice turned bitter. "My sister tried to escape. She wanted to be normal, wanted college and boyfriends and a life that didn't involve looking over her shoulder. The drugs were her way out. Permanent escape. I'm sorry. Don't be." She made her choice. I made mine. I stayed because someone had to. Because walking away would have meant everything my grandfather built crumbling, would have meant the families we protect being absorbed by someone worse. He looked at her, and Sophie saw genuine pain in his eyes. "So yes, I could have been something else. But at what cost?" Sophie didn't have an answer for that. She just reached out, without thinking, and took his hand. Nico stiffened, clearly not used to casual comfort, but he didn't pull away. They sat like that for a long moment, connected by nothing more than shared loneliness and the weight of impossible situations. "Thank you," Sophie said finally. "For protecting Jessica. For protecting me. Even though we're strangers you didn't ask for. You stopped to help my grandmother when no one else would. That means you're not a stranger. You're family." His hand tightened on hers briefly, then released. "Get some rest, Sophie. Tomorrow we start fixing this mess." He left her alone with her tea and her thoughts. And Sophie realized something that terrified and comforted her in equal measure. She was starting to trust him, starting to believe that despite the violence and the danger in the criminal empire, Nico Moretti was fundamentally someone who kept his promises. And in a world that had just turned inside out, that was something worth holding on to. The meeting with the Valentinos was scheduled for 8 p.m. at a restaurant in Greektown, neutral territory owned by the Papadopoulos family who'd been mediating Chicago disputes since the 1950s. Nico left the safe house at 7, dressed in a different suit, this one darker, more severe. He looked like he was going to war disguised as a business dinner. "Stay here," he told Sophie. "Vincent's outside. 2 more men watching the perimeter. Don't answer the door for anyone except me or Nana. What if something goes wrong? It won't." But his jaw was tight. His movements precise in the way Sophie had learned meant he was preparing for violence even while hoping to avoid it. "But if I'm not back by midnight, Vincent has instructions. He'll get you somewhere safer. Nico." He paused at the door, looked back at her. "I'll come back. I promise." Then he was gone, and Sophie was alone with her fear and the encrypted phone that felt like a lifeline and a weight at the same time. She tried to study, to focus on her anatomy notes, but her mind kept drifting to a restaurant across the city where men in expensive suits were deciding her fate over wine and bread. At 9:15, Maria called. "How are you holding up, dear?" Sophie's throat tightened at the warmth in Maria's voice. "I'm terrified. Is that normal?" "Completely normal. I was terrified through most of my husband's business dealings, and I grew up in this world." Maria's voice softened. "Nico will handle it. He's better at this than his grandfather ever was. Smarter, more controlled. What if they don't want to negotiate? What if they want blood? Then Nico will give them something else to want more." A pause. "He's good at that. Finding what people value more than violence. It's why our family has survived when others have fallen." They talked for another hour, Maria filling the silence with stories about Nico as a child, about the grandson who'd once wanted to be an architect before his father died and responsibility crushed his dreams. Sophie listened, grateful for the distraction, piecing together the portrait of a man who'd been shaped by loss into something harder than he'd ever intended to be. At 10:43, the front door opened. Sophie jumped up from the couch, her heart in her throat. Nico walked in, and relief flooded through her so intensely she felt dizzy. He was intact, no blood, no visible injuries, just exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "It's done," he said. "What happened?" Nico loosened his tie, sank onto the couch beside her. "The Valentinos wanted access to our port operations. They're expanding into shipping. Need distribution channels we control. Marco approaching you was meant to pressure Nana into arranging a meeting. So it was never really about me? You were leverage. A tool." His expression darkened. "They miscalculated. Badly." "What did you do?" "I gave them limited access to 2 of our smaller ports in exchange for a percentage of their profits and a guarantee that you, Nana, and anyone connected to our family are permanently off limits. Any violation results in immediate termination of the agreement and severe consequences." He looked at her, something fierce in his eyes. They agreed. "It's over." Sophie should have felt relief. Instead, she felt anger rising hot and sharp in her chest. "I was leverage, a tool. And now what? I go back to my normal life and pretend none of this happened? Pretend I didn't see how disposable I was? You were never disposable. I was useful. There's a difference." Sophie stood up, pacing, her hands shaking. "Your grandmother brought me into this world without telling me what it really was. You protected me because it served your interests. I was never actually a person to any of you, just a convenient piece on a board I didn't even know I was playing on." "That's not true. Isn't it?" She whirled to face him. "Tell me honestly, Nico. If I hadn't saved Maria's life, if I was just some random girl the Valentinos targeted, would you have protected me? Would you have cared at all?" The silence stretched between them, heavy and damning. "That's what I thought." Sophie's voice broke. "I need to leave. Tonight. I need to go back to my apartment, my life, and forget any of this ever happened." "You can't." Nico stood too, his composure cracking. "The agreement protects you, but only as long as you're visibly under Moretti protection. If you leave now, if you cut ties, the Valentinos will see it as an opening. So I'm a prisoner. Your family. I'm not your family." The words exploded out of her, months of exhaustion and fear and loneliness finally breaking through. I'm a broke nursing student who helped an old woman stand up. That's all I was. That's all I should have been. But you people turned it into something else, dragged me into your world. And now I can't leave even though I want nothing to do with any of it. Nico moved toward her, and Sophie saw something in his face she'd never seen before. Genuine pain, raw and unguarded. You're right. We did drag you into this. And I'm sorry. But Sophie, please believe me when I say that whatever started as obligation became something real. Nana loves you. He stopped, seemed to struggle with something. You matter. Not because of what you did, but because of who you are. Pretty words from someone who probably says whatever he needs to get what he wants. You think I want this? You think I want to care about someone outside my organization? Someone soft and good who has no idea how to survive in my world? His voice turned fierce. You're a liability, Sophie. Every moment you're connected to my family, you're at risk. It would be easier, smarter, safer for everyone if I just paid you off and sent you away. Then why don't you? Because I can't. The confession seemed torn from him. Because somewhere between protecting you out of obligation and getting to know who you actually are, I started caring whether you lived or died. And that's dangerous for both of us. Sophie stared at him, her anger warring with something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. I don't know what you want me to say to that. Say you'll stay. Not because you have to. Not because of the agreement or the threat. Stay because you want to. Because you feel it too. This thing between us that shouldn't exist but does anyway. I don't feel anything. But the lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Yes, you do. Nico moved closer, his voice dropping. You feel it when we're in the same room. You feel it when I look at you. You felt it that first night when I promised to protect you and some part of you believed me even though you shouldn't have. He was right. God help her, he was right. Sophie had felt it from the beginning. This pull towards someone she should have been running from. But acknowledging it meant accepting that her life had changed permanently. That there was no going back to the invisible girl who'd existed before Maria Moretti fell on a sidewalk. I'm terrified, she whispered. I know. So am I. Nico's hand lifted, hesitated, then gently touched her face. I've never let anyone matter this much. It's the stupidest thing I've ever done, but I can't seem to stop. Sophie closed her eyes, leaned into his touch despite every rational thought screaming at her to run. What happens now? Now we figure it out, together. His thumb traced her cheekbone, gentle and reverent. Stay, Sophie, please. Not as leverage, not as obligation. Stay because you want to see where this goes. She opened her eyes, looked at him, this dangerous man who'd somehow become her anchor in a world that had turned upside down. She thought about Maria's kindness, about Vincent's quiet protection, about the way Nico looked at her like she was something precious instead of disposable. She thought about walking away, going back to her lonely apartment and her crushing debt and her invisible existence. And she thought about staying, about choosing this terrifying new reality, with all its danger and darkness, and unexpected warmth. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll stay, but not because you asked, because I want to. Nico's smile was radiant, transforming his face into something young and hopeful. That's all I needed to hear. He pulled her into his arms, and Sophie let herself be held, let herself feel safe for the first time in weeks. Whatever came next, whatever dangers still waited in the shadows, at least she wouldn't face them alone. At least she'd chosen this. And that made all the difference. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange kind of domestic peace. Sophie continued her internship, Vincent ever present, but increasingly invisible as she learned to accept his protection as normal. She had dinner with Maria twice a week, their conversations deepening as Maria shared stories about her life, her marriage, the business she'd helped build from the shadows. And Nico became a constant presence in ways Sophie hadn't expected. He'd show up at the safe house with takeout, claiming he needed to check security but really just wanting company. They'd talk late into the night about everything and nothing, Sophie sharing her medical school dreams, Nico revealing the architecture he'd once loved designing in the margins of his business ledgers. You should go back to it, Sophie said one night, looking at a sketch he'd drawn of a building that was all elegant lines and impossible beauty. Architecture, I mean. You're talented. That ship sailed when my father died. Nico's voice was matter of fact. No self-pity. The business needed leadership. I provided it. But what about what you needed? He looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression. I'm starting to think maybe what I needed was just someone to ask that question. They kissed for the first time that night. A gentle exploration that turned heated, desperate, full of all the fear and want and need they'd been holding back. Sophie pulled away first, her breath ragged, her heart racing. This is crazy. Completely. Nico's forehead rested against hers. Are you okay with crazy? Sophie thought about it. About the nursing student she'd been and the woman she was becoming. About how her life had been barely surviving and was now terrifying but alive in ways she'd never imagined. Yeah, she said. I think I am. But peace never lasted in the Moretti world. 3 weeks after the Valentino agreement, Sophie was at Northwestern when Vincent appeared, his face grim, his posture radiating tension. We need to go. Now. Sophie's stomach dropped. What happened? There's been an incident. Marco Valentino is dead. Someone killed him last night. Made it look like a Moretti hit. The agreement is void. We're at war. The world tilted sideways. Sophie let Vincent guide her through the hospital, into the waiting car, her mind struggling to process. War. They were at war. And she was right in the middle of it. The safe house was full of men when they arrived, all of them armed, all of them moving with the precision of soldiers preparing for battle. Nico stood at the center, issuing orders, his face a mask of controlled fury. When he saw Sophie, relief flickered across his features before the mask snapped back into place. Upstairs. Now. Pack everything. What's happening? The Valentinos think we broke the agreement. They're retaliating. You're not safe here anymore. He gripped her shoulders, his fingers tight. I'm sending you out of the city. Montana, remote location, security detail. You'll be safe there until this is over. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. Sophie pulled away from him, planted her feet. I'm not running while you fight a war that started because of me. This isn't because of you. This is because someone wants us to go to war. Someone who benefits from Moretti and Valentino destroying each other. Nico's voice turned pleading. Please, Sophie. Let me protect you the only way I know how. Let me send you somewhere they can't reach you. And if you die while I'm gone, if I lose you because I was too scared to stay, her voice broke. I've lost everyone, Nico. My parents, my friends, my old life. I can't lose you too. I won't. Something cracked in his expression. He pulled her against him, buried his face in her hair. You're the stupidest, bravest person I've ever met. I learned from the best. They held each other while chaos moved around them. Two people choosing each other in the middle of a storm neither of them had asked for. And when Nico finally pulled back, his eyes were fierce with determination. If you stay, you follow every order I give. No arguments, no hesitation. Can you do that? Yes. Then welcome to war, Sophie Chen. Try not to get yourself killed. The attack came at 3 a.m., professional and brutal. Sophie woke to the sound of breaking glass, gunfire, Vincent shouting orders. Nico was beside her instantly, pressing a gun into her hand. Safety's off. Point and shoot if anyone gets through that door who isn't me or Vincent. Then he was gone, moving into the hallway with a weapon of his own. And Sophie was alone in the darkness with a gun she'd never fired and terror clawing at her throat. The sounds of violence filtered up from downstairs, controlled chaos that spoke of professionals on both sides. Sophie knelt behind the bed, her hands shaking, the gun heavy, foreign in her grip. Every horror movie she'd ever watched, every crime show where the innocent civilian panicked and got themselves killed, played through her mind on repeat. The door burst open. Sophie raised the gun, her finger on the trigger. Don't shoot! Vincent, blood on his shirt but moving strongly. We're pulling back. Nico wants you in the safe room. Now. Sophie scrambled up, let Vincent guide her into the hallway, down a flight of stairs she hadn't known existed. The safe room was small, concrete, with supplies and a phone, and enough air to last days. Vincent pushed her inside. Lock it behind me. Don't open it for anyone except Nico or me. We'll give you the code word, Salvatore. Anyone else, you shoot first and ask questions later. Vincent, we've got this. Stay alive, Sophie. That's your only job. The door closed. Sophie locked it, her hands trembling so badly she could barely work the mechanism. Then she was alone in silence so complete it felt like being buried alive. She waited. Minutes passed like hours, every sound amplified by fear and imagination. She clutched the gun Nico had given her, her finger carefully away from the trigger, and prayed to a god she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. A knock at the door. 3 raps, precise and deliberate. "Sophie, it's me. The word is Salvatore." Nico's voice. Sophie's knees went weak with relief. She unlocked the door, pulled it open. Nico stood there, blood on his face and hands, his suit torn, but alive. Wonderfully, impossibly alive. Sophie threw herself at him, and he caught her, held her tight enough to hurt. "It's over. We got them all." His voice was rough. "The Valentinos sent a death squad. We were ready. It's finished. Are you hurt?" "Nothing that won't heal." He pulled back, looked at her face like he was memorizing it. "You followed orders. Stayed safe. Thank you. Did we win?" "We survived. That's the same thing." He took the gun from her shaking hands, engaged the safety. "Come on, we're getting out of here. Going to Nana's house. She'll want to see you." They climbed out of the safe room into devastation. The beautiful greystone was destroyed. Bullet holes in walls, blood on hardwood floors, furniture overturned. But Vincent stood in the wreckage giving orders, and other men moved with purpose, cleaning up evidence, making calls. The Morettis had survived, and so had Sophie. Maria's brownstone felt like sanctuary. The old woman met them at the door, her face pale but composed, and pulled Sophie into a crushing hug. Thank God you're safe." They sat in Maria's kitchen, drinking tea like it was normal, like they hadn't just survived a coordinated attack, like Sophie's hands weren't still shaking from adrenaline crash. Nico made calls, his voice quiet and controlled, dealing with the aftermath of violence with practiced efficiency. "The Valentinos will retaliate," Maria said quietly. "This won't end here." "It already has." Nico hung up, looked at them both. "Carlo Valentino just called. Wants a meeting. Says he didn't authorize the hit. That it was Marco's second-in-command acting independently. He's offering full peace, complete withdrawal from our territory, and the head of the man who ordered the attack." "You believe him?" Sophie asked. "I believe he's terrified. We killed 8 of his men tonight. He knows we can reach him anytime we want." Nico's smile was cold. "Peace from a position of strength. It's the only kind that lasts." 2 days later, Sophie stood on Maria's terrace watching the sun set over Chicago. Her city that looked the same but felt completely different. She'd survived a mob war. She'd held a gun and hidden in a safe room and come out the other side still breathing. She'd chosen this life. And somehow, impossibly, she didn't regret it. Arms wrapped around her from behind. Nico's chin rested on her shoulder, his warmth surrounding her. "What are you thinking? That I should be terrified? That I should run as far and fast as I can?" Sophie leaned back against him. "But I'm not. Is that crazy?" "Completely." His arms tightened. "Are you okay with crazy?" Sophie thought about her journey, from invisible waitress to the woman who'd become family to Chicago's most powerful crime organization. About Maria's love, Vincent's protection, Nico's fierce devotion. About how her lonely, struggling life had transformed into something dangerous and warm and impossibly full. "Yeah," she said, "I really am." They stood together as the city lights flickered on, 2 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way possible. Sophie had stopped on a sidewalk to help a fallen stranger, and that single act of kindness had rewritten her entire existence. She was Moretti family now, protected, cherished, and terrifyingly in love with a man whose world was built on violence and loyalty in equal measure. Her nursing school professors would have called it Stockholm Syndrome. Her parents would have been horrified. But Sophie knew the truth, knew it in her bones. In the way Nico held her like she was precious, in the way Maria looked at her with a grandmother's love, in the way Vincent had taken a bullet to protect her during the attack. This was family. Dangerous, complicated, morally ambiguous family. But family nonetheless. And that was worth every terrifying moment. 3 months later, Sophie graduated at the top of her class. Maria, Nico, and Vincent sat in the audience cheering louder than anyone else. Northwestern offered her a full-time position in their emergency department, and Sophie accepted, continuing her work saving lives while navigating the complexities of being connected to the Moretti organization. She moved out of the safe house and into Nico's penthouse, a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. They were partners now, in every sense that mattered, building something real in the spaces between danger. Maria threw her an engagement party 6 months after that, and Sophie said yes to Nico's proposal, with tears streaming down her face. Knowing she was choosing a life that would never be safe or normal, but would always be full of love and loyalty and fierce protection. The wedding was small, just family, held in the garden of Maria's brownstone. Sophie wore cream lace and carried wildflowers. And when Nico slipped the ring onto her finger, she saw everything they'd survived reflected in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered as they danced, "for stopping that day, for being brave enough to stay, for choosing me even when you shouldn't have. Thank you for showing me what family really means." Sophie rested her head on his shoulder, content in a way she'd never imagined possible. "For protecting me, for loving me, for making me part of something bigger than myself." They swayed together as the sun set, surrounded by people who'd become her family through choice rather than blood. Sophie thought about the frightened girl who'd helped an old woman off a sidewalk, about how that single moment of compassion had led to everything that mattered now. She'd saved Maria's life. And in return, the Morettis had given her one worth living. That was the truth behind the headline, behind the dramatic title. Sophie hadn't just helped a mafia boss's grandmother. She'd found family, found love, found purpose in the most unlikely place possible. And she'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.